Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of the strangest, most suspiciously jittery corners of European history. The legendary secret German chocolate that allegedly kept World War II soldiers wide awake for, get this, 72 hours. That's right. Tonight we'll unravel the sticky, sleep-deprived mystery of how German troops went from sleepy schnitzel eaters to caffeinated super goblins, all thanks to a candy bar so powerful it probably needed its own medical disclaimer. Imagine a chocolate so strong, your Fitbit would call 911 on you. If you've ever wondered what would happen if Red Bull and Willy Wonka had a child, tonight is your night. So before you get too comfortable, do me a favor, like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me what time it is where you're listening. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soft, sleep-inducing white noise, and find a position where your heart rate feels manageable. Tonight's story is equal parts soothing bedtime comfort and, well, caffeinated chaos. Let's get curious for a second. What would it actually feel like to be a World War II soldier? Issued chocolate that could turn you into a cross between the Flash and a paranoid squirrel. Did this chocolate really exist? Or was it just a desperate attempt to make military rations taste like less of a punishment? Did anyone ever fall asleep mid-march and wake up with their head inside a ration tin? And what happened when the chocolate wore off? Did people simply collapse, or did they ascend to a higher plane of exhausted existence? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1942. The world is at war, your boots are heavy, your eyelids are heavier, and someone just handed you a suspiciously shiny chocolate bar. And for the first time in your life, candy comes with side effects. It's 1942, and you're somewhere between sleep and paperwork in a dimly lit German command center. Generals are arguing over maps, radios, squawk like caffeinated geese, and everyone is very, very tired. The answer to exhaustion? Not naps, never naps. It's a new kind of ration, chocolate, but make it medical. Let's set the scene. The air in the bunker smells like a mixture of wet wool, burnt coffee, and the anxious hope that someone will invent central heating before the war ends. Your uniform itches. Someone coughs behind you. A dry, bureaucratic cough. The kind that says, "I haven't blinked since Monday." Outside, boots slap against muddy cobblestones, and inside, a low-level panic is humming through the floor. The war is going badly, or at least not going well enough for anyone to risk a nap. Orders come in at every hour. Paperwork multiplies like rabbits. It's only natural that everyone's eyes keep drifting to the growing pile of emergency rations stacked against the far wall. But these aren't the chocolate bars you grew up with. No, these are industrial. They come in dull, olive green wrappers that promise efficiency and nothing else. On the side, a stamp, a warning, and a phrase that translates roughly to consume only in case of extreme fatigue. Or if you dare, if Willy Wonka designed this, he was having a nervous breakdown at the time. Let's talk logistics. Because nothing says bedtime story like a supply chain. You might picture a group of uniformed officials hunched over a table, plotting the quickest way to Paris. In reality, tonight, they're plotting the quickest way to keep soldiers upright. Somewhere in the back, a nutritionist is arguing with an officer about the maximum safe dose of caffeine a human body can survive before it just gives up and leaves the room. The answer is always more than last time. Why chocolate? Because caffeine pills look suspiciously like medicine, and handing out medicine suggests you care. But a chocolate bar? That's a treat. That's morale in a wrapper. It's childhood and comfort. And the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, life isn't just endless mud and paperwork. So the war machine cranks into action. Orders are sent out. Find cocoa, find sugar, find whatever weird plants you can grind into powder and call energy. Deliver it to the front. If it tastes like regret, that's just a bonus. Somewhere, a committee meets to debate the perfect balance of delicious and medically alarming. They settle firmly on alarming. If you're lucky, you get a batch that just tastes like over-roasted coffee with a hint of tire rubber. If you're unlucky, it also makes your left eyelid twitch. Still, it beats eating another cold grey slab of spam. You receive your orders. Along with your usual kit, helmet, boots, too-short blanket, you're issued a small cardboard box containing 3 chocolate bars, a warning, and a pamphlet titled How to Survive Without Sleep. The pamphlet is blank inside. Turns out, the best advice is just eat the bar and keep moving. You laugh because it's either that or cry, or possibly both at the same time. From a logistics perspective, the chocolate is a minor miracle. It's easy to carry, hard to destroy, and if you drop it in the mud, nobody will ever know. You can trade it for cigarettes, letters from home, or the vague promise of a warm meal. The only thing you can't trade it for is a nap, because that would be treasonous optimism. Night falls. The war room quiets, but only on the surface. Every radio crackles with rumors. The Russians have their own chocolate. The Americans are rumored to have invented a chewing gum that lets you see in the dark. You eat your ration and wait for the magic. It doesn't taste like hope, but it does taste like staying awake. Just a little bit longer. And so, the birth of emergency chocolate isn't just about logistics or caffeine. It's about desperation disguised as innovation. A whole army trying to outrun exhaustion by wrapping it in foil and calling it progress. And as you take another bitter bite, staring at maps and listening to the endless drone of the radios, you realize this is how wars are really fought. Not just with guns and tanks, but with snacks designed to keep you moving when every cell in your body wants to give up and sleep. You look down at the bar in your hand. It's dark, dense, and smells like the world's strongest espresso had a baby with an oil drum. Ingredients? Caffeine, cola nut, sugar, a dash of pharmaceutical optimism, and just enough chocolate to keep you in denial. Let's really examine this thing, because if you think modern energy bars are weird, you have never encountered a 1940s German military ration. This is not your childhood chocolate. It doesn't melt in your hand, your mouth, or, according to some rumors, even in the fires of Mordor. The bar is slightly tacky, almost gritty, and it weighs about as much as a small brick. Each square promises energy, which is code for good luck falling asleep before next Thursday. But what, exactly, is in this miracle of military engineering? Let's go ingredient by ingredient. First, caffeine. Not a sprinkle, not a hint. We're talking what if coffee became a solid and then started lifting weights. Caffeine is the main event here. The secret sauce. The ingredient that gets its own paragraph in the military training manual. The idea: if you can't sleep, you can't mutiny. If you can't sleep, you can march through mud. Memorize the lyrics to every military song, and still have the energy to regret all your life choices. Next up is cola nut. For the uninitiated, cola nut is what made original sodas so punchy, and here it's been ground down and wedged into your candy bar like an edible defibrillator. Supposedly, it's there for clarity and focus. What it delivers is a brief existential crisis, followed by the realization that your eyebrows are sweating. The scientists who designed this probably hadn't slept in weeks, and their only guiding principle was, more is more. And of course, there's sugar. Lots of sugar. Not to make it taste good, perish the thought, but to turbocharge the caffeine and cola nut. Sugar is here as the rocket booster, that split-second high before the crash. It's the ingredient that, for a few fleeting moments, makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, you can finish reading that entire field manual. Spoiler, you never do. But what really sells this as chocolate is, in fact, a trace amount of actual cocoa. It's there mostly to provide plausible deniability. See? It's chocolate. It's fun, you tell yourself, as your left hand trembles and your right hand writes a strongly worded letter to your digestive system. The chocolate is bitter, almost medicinal, so much so that you wonder if you're actually chewing through a coffee filter. The taste lingers, and not in a good way. It's the kind of flavor you remember decades later, in therapy. Now, the dash of pharmaceutical optimism. This is the secret blend. Vitamins, maybe some B12, perhaps a whisper of something classified. All you know is that after half a bar, you can feel colors. Your heart rate speeds up, your pupils dilate, and you start seeing solutions to problems you didn't even know you had. You wonder briefly if this is what Einstein felt like before inventing relativity, or if he just needed a nap. The bar comes wrapped in wax paper, with ominous warnings printed in 3 languages. Consume only in case of emergency, it says, which, let's be honest, is how every day feels by week 2 of the campaign. You're supposed to ration it, to save it for the worst moments. The long night marches, the sudden orders, the surprise inspections. In reality, you nibble at it during the slow, grinding boredom of guard duty, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Soldiers joke that the bar contains the soul of a tired mule. Others whisper that it was invented by a chemist who wanted revenge for being woken up too early. Some claim there's a secret ingredient, the will to stay awake long enough to outlast your officer's pep talks. The truth is, the science behind the bar is a mixture of desperation and overconfidence. Laboratory notes, what little survived, reveal endless tweaks. More caffeine, less chocolate, extra vitamins, a pinch of whatever looked energetic. Sometimes the bars would crumble. Sometimes they'd fuse into a single, immovable mass. But always they'd deliver the same effect. Sleep was a distant dream, and you were now one with the universe, or at least with your clipboard. And, as you finish your inspection of the bar, you realize you're holding not just a ration, but a science experiment in disguise. A small, dense cube of ambition, anxiety, and the collective hope of everyone who thought war could be won by chemistry alone. One bite at a time. Before you deploy, take a moment to visit the chocolate factory. Here's Hilda, former pastry chef, now government chocolatier. She's mixing industrial-strength cocoa with enough caffeine to keep an elephant awake for finals week. The government says it's for morale. She says it's for lawsuits. The factory itself is nothing like the cheery patisseries of Hildy's youth. It's a vast, echoing warehouse filled with the sharp tang of burnt sugar and a noise level that suggests a train is constantly about to arrive. Gleaming copper vats churn a thick, tarry mixture under the flickering gaze of fluorescent lights. The machinery, equal parts World War I surplus and borrowed bakery equipment, rumbles and groans as it cranks out chocolate bars by the thousand. Every so often, the whole building shudders, as if protesting what's happening inside. Hilda, who once dreamed of crafting tiny marzipan animals and elaborate cream-filled pastries, now spends her days in a stained apron, elbows deep in a mixture that can only be described as medically alarming. Her old recipes are tucked away in a flour-dusted book at home, replaced by military orders demanding chocolate with the texture of roofing tile and the kick of a horse. She isn't alone. The factory workforce is a rotating cast of conscripted bakers, confused interns, and a few men who claim to have once worked for Swiss chocolate houses. but seems suspiciously unfamiliar with both chocolate and Switzerland. There's also one elderly night watchman who insists the original recipe came from Napoleon's dentist, but nobody listens to him anymore. Each day, Hilda receives a new stack of orders from the Ministry of Nutrition and sometimes Science. The requests grow more bizarre. Increase shelf life, decrease palatability, less snacking on duty, add vitamins, but not so much that anyone feels healthy. Her personal favorite, find a way to make it taste slightly less like regret. She gives it her best shot, but there's only so much you can do when the main ingredient is legal stimulants. The cocoa comes in dusty sacks, marked best if used before the next regime. Sugar is rationed and must be stretched, often replaced with syrups of mysterious origin. And the caffeine, delivered in tightly sealed drums, accompanied by warning labels and the occasional side-eye from the local pharmacist. One scoop too many, and the batch starts vibrating on its own. Let's talk about the creative process. Hild pours, stirs, and tastes. Each sample is tested for texture. Is it chewable, or does it shatter teeth? For flavor, does it taste like hope, or more like old boot? And, of course, for its ability to keep a grown man awake through artillery fire and a poetry reading by the regimental chaplain. The result is a chocolate bar so potent, even the factory mice seem nervous around it. Morale, according to the government memos, is meant to soar. A taste of home, they promise. A moment of comfort, but as Hild surveys the assembly line, she can't help but notice that the only thing rising is the collective heart rate. She worries, too, about the unintended consequences. The local doctor has started writing articles about caffeine-induced existentialism and unexplained sleepwalking incidents. There's talk of including an apology note in each ration. Still, there's a certain pride in the work, twisted as it may be. Hildy supervises the wrapping process, watching as thousands of bars are bundled, stamped, and shipped out to the front lines. She sneaks a real chocolate truffle into her apron pocket, a small rebellion against the industrial chaos around her. The war has made everyone adapt. But in the quiet moments, she remembers the days of cream and sugar, of laughter, and customers who could actually sleep. By the end of the day, the factory is a little quieter. The bars are stacked, the vats scrubbed, and Hilda writes a note to herself. Next week, experiment with adding vanilla. Or, if the ministry agrees, a small drop of mercy. She locks up, waves to the night watchman, who is, predictably, asleep at his post, and heads home under a sky that feels a little heavier every night. So the next time you unwrap a bar of chocolate, spare a thought for Hildy and her reluctant crew. They're not making treats, they're fueling a nation's insomnia, one anxious, buzzing soldier at a time. And, as she'll tell you, sometimes survival means turning your dreams into something a little more bitter, a little more practical, and a lot more likely to keep you awake until sunrise. You're in basic training, learning to march, dig, and ignore the existential dread. Then they hand you a bar. Eat only when absolutely necessary, your sergeant warns, as if this is the nuclear launch code of snacks. You wonder if your stomach will ever forgive you. From day one, military, life is a brutal education in delayed gratification. You get up before dawn, make your bed until it looks like it was designed by a geometrically obsessed ghost, and then stumble out onto the parade ground, where a symphony of shouting, running, and the occasional tragic bugle solo awaits. Your body aches in places you didn't know existed. Your boots are already plotting against you. At night, you lie in your bunk, one eye open, hoping that tomorrow's drills won't involve crawling through mud that smells suspiciously like last week's lunch. Amid all this, the chocolate bar stands out, not as a treat, but as a kind of edible hand grenade. Your comrades eye it nervously, each of you clutching your ration like it might explode or vanish. It isn't a reward, it isn't comfort, it's a tool, issued with the same weighty importance as your helmet or your canteen. This isn't for fun, your sergeant repeats, eyeing you with the same suspicion he reserves for recruits with suspiciously shiny boots. This is strategy. There's an odd reverence around the chocolate bar, as if it's been blessed by the high priest of caffeine himself. The instructions are delivered with military precision. Don't eat it now. Don't eat it when you're bored. Don't even look at it unless you're sure the next hour will break you. The sergeant speaks of it in hushed tones, describing legendary moments when a well-timed chocolate bar saved the day, or at least delayed a nervous breakdown until after sunset. You listen, half convinced that the real enemy isn't across the front lines, but lurking inside that wrapper. Marching drills become a daily exercise in misery and endurance. The bar is always there, tucked away in your pocket, whispering promises of impossible energy and, perhaps, instant regret. On long marches your stomach grumbles, but the sergeant is watching, eyes like hawks daring you to break protocol. Eat it too soon, he says, and you'll regret it. Eat it too late, and you won't know the difference. It's not really advice, it's more of a riddle. As weeks pass, you start to understand the logic. This chocolate is about control. Controlling hunger, yes, but more importantly, controlling your own panic. You learn to ration not just food, but hope and comfort. Every recruit has a story about someone who ate their bar too early. They tell these stories in low voices by the fire, like ghost stories. Only instead of ghosts, it's gastrointestinal distress and a week of hyperactive insomnia. He thought he'd get a boost, says one veteran, but instead he could hear colors for 3 days and missed his own promotion ceremony. The instructors demonstrate, in all seriousness, the proper moment to consume the bar. They show charts and graphs, diagrams with arrows pointing at maximum exhaustion and emergency morale boost. You can't help but laugh a little until you realize they're serious. The chocolate bar is not dessert. It's the closest thing the army has to a magic spell. You peel back the foil and take a bite. The taste islets call it aggressively functional. The texture is gritty, the chocolate bitter, and halfway through you feel your soul vibrate. You've just eaten history's most questionable energy bar. Let's be honest, this isn't chocolate in any sense you recognize. There's no velvety smoothness, no sweet, lingering finish. Instead, it's like chewing a cross between burnt espresso grounds and gravel, with the faint aftertaste of wartime desperation. Each mouthful clings to your teeth with the enthusiasm of a tax collector. You swallow, but your taste buds stage an immediate protest. Was that a hint of cocoa, or just the phantom memory of better days? Hard to say. You consider chasing it with water, but then you remember the canteen tastes like rusty optimism and disappointment. Across the barracks, your fellow soldiers are conducting their own taste tests. Some attempt bravado, crunching away, like they're biting into gold. Others stare at the wrapper, as if waiting for a refund. A few just laugh, because if you don't laugh, you might start to cry, and nobody wants to explain chocolate-induced tears in the middle of basic training. Someone, in a desperate act of camaraderie, tries to trade their entire ration for an apple and is immediately rebuffed. The sergeant, of course, watches with a kind of grim amusement. That's not for pleasure, he reminds you, as if the concept of pleasure ever existed here in the first place. He's right, of course. This isn't the stuff of childhood birthdays or lazy afternoons. This is a chemical experiment in a wrapper, a calculated gamble between staying awake and wondering if your digestive system will ever trust you again. Within minutes, you start to feel the effects. At first, it's subtle. Your hands tremble just a little. Your heart gives a tentative flutter. You blink, and suddenly you're acutely aware of every sound: the scrape of boots, the distant clatter of a mess tin, even the annoyed buzzing of a fly that, for some reason, seems to be moving in slow motion. Colors look brighter. Time feels stranger. You experience the unique thrill of being both wide awake and slightly haunted. Soon, the physical sensations escalate. Your vision sharpens, your hearing becomes suspiciously good. You can now eavesdrop on a conversation 3 bunks away about a lost sock, a subject which, until this moment, seemed deeply uninteresting. Someone next to you claims he can feel his eyebrows growing. You laugh, then realize you're laughing too loudly, and try to rein yourself in. It's only then you notice the faint buzzing in your teeth, as if you've swallowed a very small and confused bee. The energy is real, but it's not exactly comforting. Your thoughts race, ideas popping up and darting away before you can grab hold of them. Suddenly, you remember your mother's birthday, the lyrics to a school song you haven't heard in years, and the precise order of operations for setting up a field tent. You wonder if this is what genius feels like, or if you're just approaching the event horizon of over-caffeination. The camaraderie shifts as everyone processes their first experience with the bar. Some go outside, desperate to walk off the jitters. Others just sit, eyes wide, contemplating the existential implications of aggressively functional chocolate. One inventive soul starts sketching plans for an improved version, featuring less terror, more cocoa. You wish him luck. Meanwhile, rumors start to circulate. Someone claims that in another platoon, a soldier ate 2 bars in a single night, and now has permanent night vision. Another insists the bars were originally developed for submarines but proved too powerful for underwater use. No one could sit still long enough to steer. By the time lights out approaches, no one is actually sleepy, and some begin organizing a midnight push-up contest purely to burn off excess energy. Within an hour, your vision sharpens, your hands shake, and you suddenly remember your 3rd-grade teacher's birthday. Meanwhile, the guy next to you has started reciting Goethe backwards. This is not a drill. Welcome to the front lines of experimental nutrition. Here, the chocolate is less a food and more a ticket to a strange new dimension. The field reports start coming in almost immediately, sometimes in writing, more often through wide-eyed, frantic whispers between soldiers who have all, at least once, wondered if they might vibrate right out of their own boots. The effects arrive in waves. At first, there's a jittery euphoria, as if you've accidentally sipped from a magician's secret espresso stash. Your muscles feel springy. Your thoughts leap from subject to subject, and your ability to notice irrelevant details soars to absurd new heights. You become convinced you can hear rain forming in the clouds. You feel ready to run a marathon, or at least chase the next unfortunate soul who tries to nap before sundown. And then the truly odd symptoms appear. Some soldiers describe a ringing in their ears, not unlike 1,000 tiny bells trying to form a marching band. Others report a sudden and intense desire to reorganize their kit, clean their boots for the 4th time in an hour, or compose poetry about field latrines. One private insists he saw a squirrel giving him tactical hand signals from the tree line. Nobody is quite sure if he's joking. The medical staff, initially optimistic, begin to worry as the chocolate-induced chaos grows. Medics take notes. Pulse elevated. Speech rapid. Patient claims he can read Morse code faster than the radio. They debate whether to issue calming tea or just let everyone run laps around the camp until the energy burns off. One nurse describes the chocolate bar as a miracle of chemistry and a curse upon quiet nights. There are gastrointestinal adventures too. The chocolate is dense, gritty, and designed for shelf life, not digestion. Within hours, latrine visits become urgent, frequent, and often shared with at least 3 other jittery souls. Soldiers invent new slang to describe the experience, none of it repeatable in polite company. Meanwhile, senior officers debate whether a second bar should be issued or if that would constitute a breach of the Geneva Convention. The sleep schedule disintegrates. Night falls, but nobody's eyelids droop. Card games stretch into dawn. Debates about the best way to dig a trench are held with an intensity usually reserved for religious schisms. Someone attempts to shave with a bayonet just to feel alive. You can hear laughter, muttering, and at least one guy reciting multiplication tables at warp speed. The atmosphere is less battle-hardened army and more science fair after too many sodas. Rumors begin to spread, morphing and mutating with each telling. Did you hear about the squad who ate the bars before patrol and spotted a camouflaged tank at midnight just by the sound of its gears? Or the corporal who swore he finished a week's worth of paperwork in 45 minutes, only to realize he'd filled every form out with the phrase, "I can't sleep, and neither can you." Urban legends are born in these sleepless, sugar-fueled nights. Of course, not every side effect is so dramatic. Some soldiers become uncharacteristically chatty, launching into stories about their childhood, ex-lovers, or favorite types of bread. Others become philosophers, pondering the nature of war, chocolate, and whether socks are best worn inside out. A few just stare at the stars, wide awake, unable to remember what peace and quiet felt like before the bar. By sunrise, the camp is a blend of exhausted euphoria and minor chaos. Medics hand out warnings. Officers start muttering about discipline and limiting distribution. Someone, almost certainly sleep-deprived, proposes using the chocolate as an interrogation tool. Your unit is on the move, marching through mud, rain, and existential malaise. The chocolate keeps you going, but now everyone's conversation is a little too enthusiastic, and nobody's blinked in hours. Even the lieutenant's mustache seems jittery. Your unit is on the move, marching through mud, rain, and existential malaise. The chocolate keeps you going, but now everyone's conversation is a little too enthusiastic, and nobody's blinked in hours. Even the lieutenant's mustache seems jittery. It's sometime past midnight, but time has lost all meaning. Your watch says one thing, your legs say another, and your brain, supercharged with chocolate, is convinced it's simultaneously breakfast, nap time, and the end of the world. Boots sink into the slop of another endless road, squelching with each step, the rhythm less a cadence and more a desperate plea for a pillow. Ordinarily, these marches are torture. Cold air biting your ears, damp socks chewing at your toes, and a fatigue so deep it turns every thought into mush. But tonight, the rules have changed. Tonight, your veins are pumping enough caffeine to make a barrister weep. No one dares admit it, but you're all just a little bit invincible. Marching orders come down the line, but the usual grumbling has given way to rapid-fire banter about anything and everything. One private won't stop reciting football scores from the last 5 years. Another shares wild conspiracy theories about the true origin of the energy bar. Maybe it's a secret experiment from Switzerland. Maybe it's alien technology. Maybe it's just a cruel prank by the quartermaster's mother-in-law. Around you, the world seems sharper, stranger, more alive. The trees lining the muddy track look like they're watching. The rain falls with almost comical determination, but you don't care. You're practically waterproof at this point. You step in a puddle and just keep moving, because nothing, absolutely nothing, can slow you down now. Not even the existential dread of marching into the unknown. The lieutenant, usually a model of stone-faced seriousness, is whistling a tune that sounds suspiciously like Stayin' Alive. His mustache twitches every time he calls out a command, as if it, too, has absorbed the chocolate's powers and is now capable of independent thought. Nobody blinks. Someone remarks that if you stare at the moon long enough, it blinks for you. You don't know what that means, but you laugh anyway. Everything is hilarious at 3 a.m. All-night marches are supposed to break your spirit. They're designed to push you to the edge, to see who cracks first. But tonight, no one cracks. They just keep going, bouncing along as if the laws of exhaustion don't apply. You pass another squad slogging in the opposite direction, eyes wide, steps brisk, grins plastered across their faces. It's clear they've had the chocolate too. You salute, silently acknowledging this sleepless brotherhood. Then comes the weirdness. Someone suggests playing I Spy with closed eyes. Shockingly, he's still winning. The guy behind you is humming, loudly and off-key, but everyone cheers him on. Every so often, someone sprints ahead for no reason, returns to the group, then apologizes for excess energy. The medic, the only sober mind among you, keeps a running tally of pulse rates and shaky hands, muttering about cardiac events and the ethics of weaponized candy. As the miles grind on, you begin to notice the little things. The way your boots feel lighter. The way your pack doesn't seem to dig into your shoulders as much. Maybe it's the adrenaline. Maybe it's just the total lack of sensible sleep. You find yourself hyper-focused on the road ahead, convinced you can spot tripwires, mines, or possibly tomorrow's weather just by looking at the sky. A few marchers start to narrate their steps like sports commentators. And he's rounding the mud pit. Oh, a stunning leap over the puddle. 10 points for style. Nobody can sleep. So suddenly chess is life or death. You stare at the board, hands trembling, convinced your pawns are plotting against you. Someone is writing poetry about coffee. Even the rats are restless. It's well past midnight, and the usual rhythms of trench life have fallen apart. Normally, this hour is reserved for muttered complaints, the soft snoring of the lucky, and the slow, silent march of time. But tonight, the chocolate has rewired everyone. There's a wild, sleepless energy crackling through the mud and shadows, and absolutely nobody is going down without a fight. Against boredom, against drowsiness, against their own vibrating nerves. In a dugout dimly lit by a guttering candle and the occasional flare of a match, two soldiers hunch over a battered chessboard. The set was scavenged months ago. Half the pieces are stones, a few are carved from soap, and the queen is an old brass button. But tonight, it might as well be the fate of nations. You clutch your rook like it's a live grenade. Every move is agonized over, with the intensity usually reserved for life decisions or figuring out which socks are least damp. Your hands shake from a combination of cold, caffeine, and the overwhelming need to win. You suspect the pawns are mocking you, their lopsided faces reflecting your own exhaustion and growing paranoia. Every piece is suspect. You study your opponent's face for clues. Does he have a plan, or is he just as lost as you? It's impossible to say. Time stretches and warps. Nobody remembers who's winning. You're playing for pride now. For the right to say you outlasted both your opponent and the world's most questionable energy bar. Across the room, chess isn't the only game in town. Someone is composing epic poetry, mostly lines about marching, missing socks, and the emotional journey of a man separated from his pillow. The medic is reading the dictionary out loud for reasons he refuses to explain. A pair of radio operators are stacking tin cups into elaborate towers, then knocking them down with well-aimed buttons. It's the sort of chaos that only comes from too much energy in too small a space. The rats, long-time trench companions, have caught the vibe, usually stealthy and skeptical. Tonight they skitter openly across boots and blankets, as if drawn to the collective hum of caffeine-fueled wakefulness. Someone suggests teaching them to play checkers. No one entirely disagrees. Every so often, a flare goes up in the distance, illuminating the trench in an eerie silver glow. In the brief light, you see the faces of your squad mates, eyes wide, pupils huge, some grinning, some furrowed with intense concentration. The chocolate has made everyone a little strange. Even the officer, usually asleep with earplugs jammed in, emerges to check what the noise is about. He surveys the impromptu chess league, the cup towers, the poetry slam, and just shakes his head. "Carry on," he mutters, wisely choosing not to intervene. The chess match drags on, epic and absurd. You lose track of the rules, then the point, then the pieces. It doesn't matter. For a while, you forget about the mud, the war, and the cold. You're locked in a battle of wits that, frankly, neither of you is equipped to win. Occasionally, you pause for deep philosophical debates about strategy, the meaning of life, or whether bishops really do move diagonally or are just faking it. Someone offers coffee, but everyone politely declines. You joke that if anyone adds more caffeine to their system, they'll start speaking in Morse code. The group laughs, a real, honest laugh that bounces off the trench walls, momentarily banishing the night's anxiety. You remember that, sometimes, survival means finding distraction, even if it's a midnight chess game played on a lopsided board with makeshift pieces and rules that change every round. Eventually, the game ends. No one remembers who won. Maybe nobody did. The board is abandoned. The pawns left to plot their next move. You settle back, still buzzing, not quite ready to sleep, but somehow less alone in the trench's midnight weirdness. 3 days on high-octane chocolate and your digestive system stages a rebellion. The latrines have never seen this much action. Soldiers invent new euphemisms for running to the woods, none of them printable. 3 days on high-octane chocolate and your digestive system stages a rebellion. The latrines have never seen this much action. Soldiers invent new euphemisms for running to the woods, none of them printable. To call it a crisis is putting it mildly. What begins as a quiet, collective grumble quickly erupts into a full-scale emergency, an unspoken but deeply understood race against time and biology. You're not alone in your suffering. One by one, men break formation with the wild-eyed urgency of a lottery winner who's realized his ticket was for last week's draw. The battalion's finely tuned marching order dissolves as a dozen boots suddenly veer off toward the bushes. Those who hesitate, as the old saying goes, are lost. You might expect the war to be defined by courage, sacrifice, or strategy. Nobody warned you about this. Nobody prepared you for the intestinal aftershocks of a nutritionally advanced chocolate bar whose ingredient list includes more stimulants than a mid-century pharmacy. The effect is like clockwork. Within hours of the first group taste test, the usual slow parade to the field latrine turns into a stampede. The latrine tent, already a location of despair, becomes the hottest ticket in camp. The command staff quickly recognizes a breakdown in the ranks, not due to enemy fire, but to gastrointestinal mutiny. The quartermaster, whose greatest logistical challenge used to be keeping boots dry and matches lit, is now faced with a new crisis: rationing toilet paper, finding extra shovels, and inventing a sign-up sheet for latrine use that reads like a frantic game of musical chairs. A private is assigned to latrine security, a post he neither asked for nor will ever recover from emotionally. Humor, as always, is the last defense. Every soldier invents new, increasingly creative phrases for what's happening. Urgent, strategic withdrawal, Operation Rolling Thunder, a surprise assault on the eastern flank. If it weren't so tragic, it would be the camp's most popular running gag. There's even talk of creating a bathroom medal to be awarded for acts of bravery and resourcefulness under extreme digestive distress. Of course, none of this goes unnoticed by the officers. The captain, trying to maintain discipline, attempts a stern lecture. Soldiers, we must not let our movements compromise our operational readiness. The line between leadership and stand-up comedy has never been thinner. The lieutenant, now slightly green around the edges, attempts to introduce a new schedule for ration consumption, but nobody listens. Everyone's too busy eyeing the nearest tree line. The real losers in this battle are the latrines themselves. Once the quietest spot in camp, they're now busier than the mess tent at mealtime. Privacy is a distant memory. You learn the meaning of camaraderie as you stand in line, exchanging pained glances with fellow sufferers, and sharing in the time-honored tradition of blame, the cook. Some try to tough it out, claiming mind over matter. But after a few hours, pride is replaced by practicality and a mad dash for the last available spot. Everyday routines change. The morning roll call now features a subtle but universal bathroom check, with nods exchanged between those who have survived the night. Sentries keep watch not just for enemy movement, but for the ominous shuffle of someone who's reached the point of no return. Letters home become vague on the details. Camp life is active. Send more socks, and if possible, a case of Imodium. There are, naturally, some attempts to solve the problem. The medical officer proposes cutting the chocolate ration, only to be met with open revolt. After all, who wants to go back to the days of falling asleep on sentry duty? Rumors start that the Allies have a counter-chocolate ration, which balances energy with, shall we say, more reliable results. If only. By the end of the week, things settle into a new, chaotic normal. The initial panic fades, replaced by resigned acceptance. You develop a sixth sense for when disaster is imminent, and a new appreciation for the simple peace of an empty latrine. Eventually, someone finds humor in the memory, and the Great Bathroom Crisis of 1942 enters camp legend, retold with dramatic flair and a careful glossing over of the worst details. You try to write home, "Dear Mutter, the weather is fine, and so are my teeth. I haven't slept since Tuesday. Please send socks and possibly sedatives." You worry the censors will think you're smuggling Morse code in your handwriting. Correspondence from the front has always been a delicate art. But these days, with your hands still trembling from the latest chocolate ration, it's closer to performance art. The paper shakes as you press your pen to the page, and your script looks like a seismograph during an earthquake. There's a moment where you debate whether to just draw a picture instead, perhaps of a soldier with cartoonishly wide eyes and a coffee cup bigger than his helmet. Still, it's important to sound normal, so you focus. You report on camp life in vague, hopeful tones. Everything is good, food is plentiful, and morale is high. You avoid mentioning that plentiful food includes chocolate that may be classified as a controlled substance in 3 countries. Grandma doesn't need to know that your main activity is vibrating gently while you contemplate the mysteries of the universe at 3 a.m. You try to describe daily routines without revealing that sleep is now a legend, a folk tale traded by firelight. We have busy nights, but spirits are up, you write, which is technically true. Everyone's spirits are up, down, sideways, and occasionally doing somersaults thanks to the ongoing caffeine marathon. You hope that the censors are too tired to read between the lines. A new challenge emerges as you try to find ways to say, "We're holding up fine," when in fact you haven't blinked since the last supply drop. There are sentences where you have to stop and cross out entire paragraphs. realizing you've described your new superpower of memorizing license plates at 100 meters, or your uncanny ability to recite entire chess matches from memory. Even the process of writing becomes an adventure. The ink dries almost as fast as your thoughts race. You add in the usual requests: socks, warm mittens, maybe something sweet from home. But this time, you're tempted to add chamomile tea in big, desperate letters. Just a hint, in case someone back home is reading between the lines. Somewhere, a censor is reviewing your letter, looking for secret codes or hints of military intelligence. You picture him squinting at your shaky handwriting, debating whether weather is fine is a cryptic message about troop movements or just a side effect of sleep deprivation. You wonder if there's a file somewhere titled Soldiers Reporting Insomnia and Unusual Snack Habits. Your friends are no better. Around the fire, you all joke about the letters you send. One guy brags that his latest letter was written entirely in haiku. Another admits to accidentally mailing his chessboard sketch instead of an actual letter. It becomes a camp sport. Who can make their family worry the least, while still hinting at the bizarre reality of life, fueled by government chocolate? Sometimes, when the night is quiet and you've run out of stories to tell, you imagine your mother or grandmother sitting by the kitchen table, reading your letter with a magnifying glass. Maybe she'll laugh at your jokes. Maybe she'll shake her head and wonder what they're really feeding you out there. You hope she never finds out the true nature of the energy bars, or that you now consider a full night's sleep more mythical than the Loch Ness Monster. Soon, rumors swirl of guys hoarding the bars, swapping them for cigarettes, extra boots, or that last dry sock. Chocolate becomes currency, and the economy runs on whatever keeps you vertical. It starts small, a whispered deal at the edge of a supply drop, a quick exchange of glances, the rustle of foil under a blanket at midnight. But in a world where sleep is a luxury and caffeine is worth its weight in gold, it doesn't take long for the emergency chocolate bar to become the hottest commodity on the front. Before you know it, there are ration barons among you, men who possess a sixth sense for who's just received a new batch and who's desperate enough to pay dearly for an extra bite of energy. The camp transforms into a marketplace after dark. The usual trades, tobacco, canned meat, a well-mended sock, are suddenly overshadowed by the mysterious glint of chocolate wrappers. It's not just the taste people crave, because let's be honest, nobody actually craves this chocolate. It's the power that comes with it. A single bar can buy you a spot by the fire, a turn at the cleanest latrine, or, in moments of desperation, the last dry pair of boots after a 3-day rainstorm. Everyone has a price, and everyone, it seems, is for sale. Some men stash their bars in creative hiding places, inside spare boots, beneath floorboards, tucked inside letters home with misleading descriptions like vitamin supplement or souvenir. The truly entrepreneurial set up secret trades with other units, slipping bars across the wire in exchange for stories, news, or just a friendly word from someone with less jitter in their step. It's a wild, underground economy. Privates become brokers, officers look the other way, and the line between necessity and luxury blurs. You overhear someone trading half a bar for a pack of cigarettes, only for that half to be chopped down further, sold off piece by piece to desperate men, each hoping for one more night of alertness on sentry duty. Chocolate crumbs become bargaining chips, and more than one friendship is tested when a bar goes missing. There are legends, too, about the master traders, the ones who always seem to have a stash. No matter how dire the rations get, they have a network. Lookouts in the kitchen, informants by the supply trucks, and even a guy who claims to have made a deal with the mess sergeant himself. These ration barons are both admired and quietly resented. Some say one even tried to corner the entire chocolate market, only to find himself unable to sleep for a week straight, hallucinating a chess match with a rat that he swears he lost. Humor emerges, as it always does. Someone scrawls a sign, "Chocolate broker, all trades considered, except for spam." Another posts a list of current rates, 1 bar equals 2 socks, or 3 tins of herring, or, on particularly rainy nights, 1 dry blanket. There's talk of issuing IOUs, and at least one soldier tries to get a loan with a future chocolate ration as collateral. But this isn't just about keeping awake. It's about the illusion of control, of having something to bargain with in a world where most choices are made for you. The chocolate barter system brings a little bit of agency back, one sticky, jittery square at a time. Of course, nothing lasts forever. Command eventually cracks down, issuing new rules about ration hoarding and unauthorized trades. There's a brief, failed attempt to switch to carrots as the new currency, but nobody's heart is in it. The chocolate market goes underground, subtler but still thriving, proof that necessity will always breed a little bit of creativity and a lot of questionable decision-making. You're out on patrol at 3 a.m., every leaf looks suspicious, and you can hear ants thinking. Your senses are so sharp, you could probably read a newspaper in the dark. If only you could remember how to read. The moon is just a thin smudge in a sky smeared with clouds. But for you, the world is lit up like a crime scene. The chocolate you wolfed down an hour ago is working its magic. If magic feels like electricity in your teeth and static in your brain, every stick and stone is a possible threat. Every rustle in the grass an unsolved mystery. Your squad moves in silence, but it's not the comfortable, practiced quiet of seasoned soldiers. It's the hush of people too wired to trust their own voices. The woods are alive, buzzing with nighttime life. But tonight, you're convinced all of it has a vendetta. A twig cracks somewhere to your right, and you spin, finger on the trigger, heart pounding with the kind of overreaction usually reserved for late-night emails and exes. It's a rabbit. Or is it? In this state, it could just as easily be a covert operative with exceptionally good camouflage and a taste for carrots. Every patrol is supposed to be routine, but on a chocolate high, it's like you've been dropped into an absurdist play where all the lines are whispered by shadows and suspicious-looking hedgehogs. Your brain decides now is the perfect time to remind you of every bad thing that could possibly happen. What if you get lost? What if your shoelaces come untied? What if the enemy is also awake, also eating chocolate? And right now, watching you from the other side of the woods, equally paranoid and hyped, you glance at your squad mates and realize you're not alone in this. The private next to you is scanning the horizon so intensely it looks like he's trying to will an enemy into existence. The corporal, normally the picture of calm, is mouthing silent calculations about how far you can run before the next supply drop. The sergeant, bless him, is checking the map every 5 seconds, convinced the trees have shifted in the last 10 minutes. Even the equipment feels suspicious. Your rifle is heavier, your boots too loud, your helmet one size too small. Everything is slightly off-kilter, as if the whole world has shifted half an inch to the left, and nobody bothered to update you. The patrol route, which should be burned into your memory by now, seems full of new twists and turns. Is that a bush or a man in a bush costume? Are those two glowing eyes a wild animal or Private Schneider, regretting his second bar? Hyper-awareness becomes your only friend. You start narrating everything in your head, as if auditioning for a radio drama. The soldier approaches the crossroads, senses tingling, convinced that the patch of moonlight is up to something. Every so often, you spot movement out of the corner of your eye. Just a fox, or so you hope. You wish for boredom, but the chocolate will not allow it. It's as if sleep itself has been banned by military decree. and your only option is to keep marching, keep searching, keep seeing too much. Every sound is a possible disaster, every shadow a puzzle. Even your own footsteps seem suspiciously well coordinated, and yet, through the absurdity, you get the job done. The perimeter is checked, the camp stays safe, and nobody falls asleep standing up. Not tonight, not ever. Not with a bloodstream full of experimental chocolate. You make it back to base, wide-eyed and buzzing, and try to explain the patrol to the medic, who just shakes his head and mutters something about overstimulated sentry syndrome. As dawn threatens to break, your squad collapses into your bunks, still alert, still seeing everything, and finally, mercifully, starting to come down. You survived another night patrol, not just against the enemy, but against the weird, wired wilderness of your own mind. And maybe, just maybe, you learned the real reason chocolate was invented. Not for pleasure, but for the kind of night where sleep is a myth and paranoia is standard issue. Officers, too, get their hands on the bars. Suddenly, everyone has bold new ideas. Some are strategic. Most are just elaborate plans to reorganize the sock drawer. You'd think officers would be immune to such temptations. After all, they're trained for discipline, for clear thinking, for sober command. But even the highest ranks can't resist the lure of the emergency chocolate. It starts innocently enough. A captain wants to see what the fuss is about and samples a bar. Next thing you know, he's got every map in the tent spread out on the floor and is using a shoe to demonstrate new, more aggressive supply line tactics. He hasn't blinked since lunch. Some leaders go tactical. The battalion major spends hours plotting the perfect ambush, complete with diagrams made out of bread crusts and chess pawns. His speech quickens, his hands fly in every direction, and his staff try to look attentive while wondering if anyone's actually following the plan. "Listen up," he says, pointing at a fork labeled "Enemy Reinforcements. We hit them here, here, and then pivot to socks." Everyone nods, mostly out of self-preservation. There are the would-be innovators, convinced that their new chocolate-fueled clarity is about to change the art of war. The lieutenant colonel writes a 10-page memo about the psychological advantages of brightly colored tents. Another officer starts drawing blueprints for an automatic boot cleaning device that will revolutionize field hygiene. There is an urgent staff meeting about whether the latrine schedule should be organized by shoe size, rank, or astrological sign. Meanwhile, junior officers fall victim to more mundane obsessions. One lieutenant becomes fixated on inventory, convinced that victory hinges on a perfectly aligned row of canteens. He spends the night auditing supplies, muttering, "Everything in its place. Especially the place." Another lieutenant, usually calm and collected, begins an impromptu lecture on the history of coffee, only to spiral into a debate with himself about whether chocolate is a vegetable. He has a point, technically, but it's not the time. Command tents become beehives of frantic, sometimes hilarious activity. Someone starts color-coding paperwork. Red for urgent, blue for slightly urgent, and green for ask again after I've slept. The regimental clerk, swept up in the energy, invents 3 new filing systems before breakfast, each more complicated than the last. Meanwhile, the cook is drafted into menu innovation meetings, where every meal now comes with a side of theoretical dessert. All this would be funny if it didn't have real consequences. Orders start getting longer, stranger, and more enthusiastic. Night patrols double in frequency, just to be sure. Training exercises go on twice as long, because the officers feel inspired. There's a plan to build a moat around the barracks with volunteer power. Fortunately, nobody can remember the plan in the morning. You notice, too, that staff meetings have become endurance tests. The energy is high, but the focus is fractured. The commander can go from planning an attack to rebranding the unit's mascot in the space of 3 sentences. Suggestions for new regimental mottos include "Ever Awake" and "Powered by Chocolate," both of which are rapidly vetoed by the one officer who didn't eat the bar. Not everything is chaos, though. Occasionally, the chocolate-induced inspiration produces a small miracle. An overlooked supply problem gets solved. A new drill actually improves morale, or someone finally finds that missing spanner in the toolkit. But mostly, the camp is a whirlwind of half-baked schemes, reorganized sock drawers, and the growing suspicion that maybe, just maybe, leadership could use a nap. As the effects wear off, the command staff comes down from their collective high. The memos are quietly shredded. The maps are returned to the shelf. Socks are left in a jumbled heap, just as nature intended. And the officers, now exhausted but secretly amused, swear they'll stick to coffee next time. But deep down, everyone knows the truth. In the battle between discipline and chocolate, the chocolate will always win, one ambitious, overconfident idea at a time. Somewhere in the barracks, a guy swears his friend stayed awake for 4 days and now can see through walls. Someone else claims the chocolate was invented by Einstein's evil twin. Most people just want a nap. When you cram 100 sleep-deprived, over-caffeinated soldiers together and give them a candy bar with enough kick to power a small radio, you're bound to get stories. Lots of stories. The chocolate quickly becomes legendary, the stuff of late-night whispers and absurd bets. In a world where boredom is always lurking and sleep is in short supply, rumor travels faster than common sense. It starts innocently enough. You hear tales about Private Lehman who, after downing 2 bars in a single night, supposedly stayed awake so long he read every letter from home twice, memorized 3 chess openings, and still had time to clean his rifle with what witnesses describe as unsettling enthusiasm. By morning, he was convinced the pigeons in the courtyard were spying for the Allies. Next day, another rumor surfaces. One unlucky corporal ate his chocolate ration, then discovered he could recite every rule in the field manual backwards. Someone else is convinced the bar is secretly an experiment in super soldier science, the first step in building an army of tireless automatons. A bored sergeant adds fuel to the fire by declaring, with a straight face, that the recipe was developed in a top-secret Berlin laboratory by Albert Einstein's deeply troubled brother, Heinrich. Like all the best legends, the tales grow in the telling. One group claims chocolate was originally intended for carrier pigeons, but when the birds became too powerful, the program was hastily switched to humans. Another popular myth is that if you eat a bar at midnight under a full moon, you'll be able to speak fluent Morse code for an hour. Nobody's tried it, at least nobody who remembers what happened afterward. The chocolate's effect on memory itself becomes the subject of wild debate. Some say it gives you photographic recall. Others claim it erases the entire last week. It's said that the only people immune to its powers are the cooks, who refuse to eat anything that comes with instructions and a warning label. One squad leader reports that the chocolate can make you run twice as fast, but only if you're being chased by a wild pig, or, more likely, the after effects of the Great Bathroom Crisis of 1942. There's always a skeptic in the crowd, usually a grizzled old sergeant with a 1,000-yard stare. He listens, arms crossed, as the latest legend is told. "In my day," he says, "we stayed awake on willpower and a fear of missing breakfast." Still, even he pockets a bar or two for emergencies. As the weeks drag on, the legends get wilder. One rumor claims the chocolate bars were so potent they were banned on submarines after a sailor started communicating with dolphins telepathically. Another insists that a certain batch turned everyone's hair white for a week. A claim that's impossible to prove but fun to imagine. None of this really matters, of course. The truth is, most people don't want superpowers. They want sleep. The jokes and tall tales are just a way to cope with endless exhaustion, with long nights and longer patrols, with the ever-present ache for normalcy. So you listen, you laugh, you swap stories of miraculous feats and questionable side effects, and you dream, when you can, of a world where chocolate is just a dessert, not a legend in a foil wrapper. And in the end, the myths themselves become a comfort, a reminder that, even on the worst nights, a little absurdity can keep you going. Because history isn't just what happened, it's also the stories people tell each other when they're tired, cold, and trying to stay awake, one wild rumor at a time. Eventually, the crash comes. You go from caffeinated superhero to sentient sandbag. The next day, every soldier looks like they spent the night arguing with a ghost. Eventually, the crash comes. You go from caffeinated superhero to sentient sandbag. The next day, every soldier looks like they spent the night arguing with a ghost. The transformation is dramatic and impossible to ignore. Yesterday, the entire camp was a jittery hive of energy, full of men with bright eyes and fast-talking ideas. Now, it looks like the set of a particularly grim zombie film. Boots drag across the muddy ground, helmets are askew, and nobody's quite sure where they put their gloves. The silence is heavy and resentful, punctuated only by the occasional groan as someone tries to remember how walking works. It starts slowly, with a creeping heaviness behind your eyes. One moment you're solving chess problems in your head and composing love letters in 3 languages, and the next you're staring blankly at your own shoelaces, trying to remember what they're for. The world feels muted, colors dull, sounds muffled, and thoughts come at you in slow motion, as if moving through syrup. The sparkle is gone, replaced by the quiet dread that sleep, whenever it finally arrives, will come with interest. The worst part isn't even the exhaustion, it's the sudden return of hunger, aches, and all the little miseries you managed to ignore while flying high on chocolate-induced adrenaline. Your back hurts, your legs ache. The chocolate bar that once seemed like a miracle of military science is now regarded with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for enemy propaganda or surprise inspections. The mere thought of unwrapping another makes your stomach churn. Around you, your comrades are no better. The normally chipper squad comedian is slumped over his breakfast, poking at grey porridge with all the enthusiasm of a condemned man. The sergeant, who once seemed invincible, looks 10 years older overnight. Eyes are bloodshot, conversation is minimal, and for the first time in weeks, nobody is volunteering for extra duty. A few brave souls attempt to rally the group, suggesting a round of cards or even another chess match. But the effort quickly fizzles. Everyone just wants to lie down, even if it means falling asleep in a puddle. Command tries to help by calling for high morale and discipline, but it's clear that not even the officers are immune to the hangover. One lieutenant gives a stirring speech about resilience, then promptly forgets what he was saying and sits down to put his head between his knees. The supply clerk writes a request for more coffee, fewer experiments, and accidentally mails it to his own mother. Medics are suddenly in high demand, fielding complaints of headaches, nausea, and what one soldier dramatically refers to as an existential crisis. The standard prescription is water, rest, and a stern warning to avoid eating an entire bar in one sitting. There's talk of a new ration, some kind of bland biscuit designed to slow you down and ease the inevitable descent from chocolate orbit. As the day drags on, you settle into a kind of exhausted camaraderie. Misery loves company, and there's comfort in knowing everyone else feels exactly as bad as you do. In the rare, quiet moments, you swap war stories about last night's high, the strange conversations, the impossible chess games, the fleeting belief that you could stay awake forever. You laugh, a little, and promise, just like the morning after every wild party, that you'll be smarter next time. You know you're lying. Eventually, as dusk falls and the first brave snorers begin to echo through the barracks, you finally get what you've been craving all along: real, dreamless, blissfully ordinary sleep. You drift off with the taste of regret in your mouth. And the promise to never trust a chocolate bar that comes with a warning label ever again. Tomorrow, you'll march, dig, and joke about the super soldier snack that nearly undid you. But for tonight, you rest, because what goes up must crash down. And sometimes, the only way forward is to let yourself sleep it off, and hope the next morning is just a little bit kinder. The field medics start to worry. Pulse rates spike. Complaints pour in. And there's talk of adding chamomile tea to the rations. You wonder if you'll ever stop vibrating. At first, it's just a trickle. A soldier or two wandering into the infirmary with jittery hands and a sheepish grin, complaining of a funny feeling in their chest. Probably just nerves, the medics say, with that world-weary confidence unique to people who have seen more trench foot than sunrise. But then the trickle becomes a flood. By the third week, it seems like everyone has come down with some version of the same complaint. Racing, heartbeat, shaky limbs, and an overwhelming urge to alphabetize the entire mess tent. The medics gather, holding an emergency meeting fueled by the only thing stronger than the chocolate: fear of paperwork. The consensus is clear. The new ration bar is a medical marvel and a logistical nightmare. On the one hand, there are fewer reports of soldiers falling asleep at their posts or missing patrols. On the other, there are now men claiming to hear colors and compose symphonies entirely in Morse code. They begin to document symptoms, creating a list that grows longer by the day. Elevated pulse? Check. Restless legs? Absolutely. Mysterious bouts of poetic inspiration? Oddly common. One soldier, it said, spent 3 hours reciting ode to a field latrine to an audience of equally caffeinated comrades. There are headaches, stomachaches, and a new condition the medics dub chocolate shakes, a combination of anxiety and the inability to sit still for longer than 10 seconds. The more serious side effects are harder to ignore. Insomnia spreads like a rumor, infecting entire platoons. The barracks are filled with wide-eyed men staring at the ceiling, counting imaginary sheep that run laps around their beds. The medics start distributing sleeping powders, then scale back when they realize the combination of stimulants and sedatives just produces philosophical debates at 3 a.m. about whether socks have a preferred orientation. Concerned, the medical staff experiment with alternatives. They try herbal teas, soothing music, and even mandatory quiet time. For a brief, doomed week, there is an effort to swap the chocolate for hardtack biscuits. But the backlash is immediate and ferocious. One corporal nearly starts a riot when he discovers his emergency ration now tastes like rehydrated disappointment. Meanwhile, rumors swirl. Are the bars shrinking? Has someone in supply started diluting the recipe? Did an officer actually write a memo suggesting a 2-chocolate limit per week? The speculation is endless, fueled by sleeplessness and a healthy distrust of authority. Some soldiers turn to bartering their unused rations for more agreeable treats, while others hoard them just in case, because nothing says security like a private chocolate stash under your bunk. The medical logbooks begin to fill with creative entries. Patient reports feeling like a hummingbird. Subject attempted to rewire radio, claims it made sense at the time. There are whispers of chocolate being used as a prank, slipped into coffee, sprinkled on breakfast, weaponized in card games. The medic's tent becomes a confessional booth for guilty snackers and the sleepless alike. Despite the chaos, the chocolate isn't going anywhere. The need to stay awake outweighs the desire for calm, and command quietly shelves any plan to replace it. At least until morale improves, or until the officers themselves start hallucinating musical numbers during staff meetings. For now, the medics prescribe rest when they can, water by the gallon, and plenty of patience. You try to laugh about it. After all, in war, everything is an experiment. Some more jittery than others. You wonder, as you lie awake counting the stains on the barrack ceiling, if one day there'll be a medal for most time spent awake without snapping. Until then, you soldier on, knowing that as long as chocolate exists, so will the symphony of complaints, the endless creative solutions, and the never-ending question, will I ever stop vibrating? Years later, veterans recall the chocolate days with haunted eyes. It worked, they say, but at what cost? Some remember epic card games, others just the 1,000-yard stare. Open any memoir or faded diary from those who served on the chocolate-fueled front lines, and you'll find a pattern: long, jittery nights, punctuated by moments of manic activity and the kind of wide-awake reflections that only happen when you've gone 3 days without a nap. Entries from the era are peppered with strange doodles, endless lists of things to remember, and, occasionally, frantic apologies for handwriting that looks like it was produced during an earthquake. One private's journal, carefully preserved by his family, contains a single sentence repeated over 5 pages. I am still awake. The next entry, 3 days later, is just a simple, finally. Another recounts a legendary card game that spanned 2 entire nights, ending only when everyone forgot what game they were playing. None of us slept, he wrote, but we set the world record for talking nonsense. It's not all humor, though. Some memoirs have a melancholy undertone, a recognition that, while the chocolate kept bodies moving, it sometimes left the mind in stranger, lonelier places. The hardest part wasn't the fighting, one sergeant admitted. It was the silence at 4 a.m., the sense that everyone was awake, and yet nobody was really with you. The camaraderie was real, but so was the isolation. There's a recurring image: men sitting side by side, wide-eyed, each lost in their own private, caffeinated universe. Officers were no exception. In the margins of official field reports, you'll find notes that make less and less sense as the campaign drags on. Remind men to sleep, if possible. Send more socks. And pillows? Question: can one march while dreaming? Some letters home, meant to reassure loved ones, turn into barely coherent meditations on the beauty of the sunrise or long-winded descriptions of the perfect sandwich. You sense the struggle not just to keep moving, but to make sense of time when the hours blur and the nights never end. For some, the chocolate became a running joke, a legend passed down, exaggerated and half believed. But for others, it was a more serious chapter. We lost track of the days, one corporal wrote, but never of the nights. Night was when the world felt stretched and thin, and the memory of real sleep, a deep, restful, undisturbed sleep, became a kind of fantasy. A few admit to hiding their bars, rationing themselves to avoid the nightmare nights that always followed a full dose. Yet, even the most exhausted remember flashes of absurd joy, singing old songs at sunrise, organizing midnight foot races, and building pillow forts in the barracks just to prove you were still human, not some caffeine-powered automaton. These moments, small and silly, are threaded through the stories like gold in the mud. "We survived," another veteran wrote, "because we learned to laugh at how ridiculous it all was." The diaries and memoirs paint a picture not just of sleeplessness, but of resilience, of people enduring discomfort, loneliness, and the gnawing ache for rest with grit, wit, and the occasional well-timed prank. Some still have their old wrappers, pressed between the pages as a reminder of what they survived, and maybe as a warning to future generations about the dangers of snacks that promise more than just a sugar rush. So, did anyone actually sleep? Not much. But they lived, marched, joked, and made memories in the restless hours between dusk and dawn. And today, when they close their eyes, some can still taste that bittersweet chocolate and hear the laughter echoing through the sleepless nights. The Allies hear rumors of the magic chocolate. Spies sneak samples, taste it, and promptly invent decaf. Black market swapping leads to a short-lived era of international insomnia. Word travels fast on the front. And nothing stirs curiosity quite like a ration that comes with whispered warnings. The emergency chocolate quickly becomes a legend not just among German soldiers, but among the Allied troops who hear about it, sometimes through intercepted letters, sometimes through prisoners, and sometimes, most reliably, through the grapevine of the black market. Soon, everyone wants to know what's really in those mysterious bars. And why is every German patrol so annoyingly chipper at 3 in the morning? It isn't. Long before Allied intelligence gets wind of the situation, somewhere behind enemy lines, a British officer writes in his notebook, "Germans displaying unusual stamina on night patrol, suspect new stimulant. Chocolate-based? Request sample for analysis." This is followed by a top-secret operation, part espionage, part scavenger hunt, dedicated to obtaining a bar. After a series of tense negotiations involving cigarettes, a bottle of brandy, and a promise not to report anyone for minor looting, a sample changes hands. The first Allied soldier to taste the chocolate does so with all the bravery of a man who's eaten army stew for 6 months straight. He takes one bite, chews thoughtfully, and then promptly announces, "This explains a lot." Within half an hour, he's reorganized the radio tent, written 3 pages of poetry about boots, and declared a lifelong commitment to drinking only water from now on. The next morning, the chocolate is passed to a chemist, who studies it, frowns deeply, and files a report concluding, "Not recommended for civilian consumption." But, as always, the black market moves faster than military bureaucracy. The bars begin to circulate in Allied camps, passed hand to hand like forbidden treasure. Some soldiers break off tiny pieces and trade them for cigarettes, soap, or information. Others, caught up in the excitement, eat an entire bar in one go and then spend the rest of the night either patrolling twice as fast or holding intense, whispered conversations with nearby trees. It's not long before the effects become camp legend. Tales spread of squads who ate the chocolate before a big raid and ended up cleaning the barracks instead, convinced it was the only way to ensure victory. One unit swears their sentry stayed awake for 3 consecutive nights, developing a new philosophy of life and an intense dislike for pigeons. The Allies try to reverse engineer the recipe, but their first attempts result in a batch so strong that the taste testers go on strike and demand hazard pay. There are darker rumors, too, about sabotage. One story claims a German double agent smuggled a whole case of bars into an Allied depot, hoping the ensuing insomnia would be as effective as any grenade. The plan almost works, at least until someone realizes that sleep-deprived soldiers are much more likely to start singing sea shanties at 2 in the morning than to lose their edge in combat. In the end, The main effect is a handful of new folk songs and a surge in demand for coffee the next day. But perhaps the funniest twist is that after all the drama, most Allied troops quickly lose interest. "Why would you want to stay awake longer?" asks one American sergeant. "I'm already running on borrowed hours and bad coffee." After a few too many nights of hyper-alert guards and chess tournaments that last until dawn, the Allied command issues a quiet directive. Avoid trading for German rations marked with red foil. They are known to cause restlessness. So the magic chocolate, once a coveted secret, fades into just another strange story from the war, a symbol of how desperation, ingenuity, and a touch of absurdity can travel across even the most hostile battle lines. The bars vanish from circulation, replaced by regular old chocolate, strong tea, and the universal longing for a real, honest night's sleep. In the end, the greatest act of sabotage may have been nothing more than convincing everyone, friend and foe alike, that sleeplessness was something to be envied. Someone spikes the officer's cocoa, pranks escalate. Before long, a rooster is painted camouflage, and the latrine gets locked from the outside for tactical reasons. It starts as a harmless joke, the sort of thing that happens when soldiers are stuck together too long with too little sleep and way too much nervous energy. Someone with a mischievous streak and access to a chocolate ration decides that the officers could use a little extra motivation. One square of the notorious emergency bar finds its way into the captain's morning cocoa. The result is immediate. The captain, normally reserved and precise, spends the next hour reorganizing the platoon's boots by color, length, and potential for morale improvement. Word spreads fast. The Great Cocoa Incident is only the beginning. Once everyone realizes just how powerful the chocolate really is, it becomes the unofficial weapon of choice in a growing campaign of pranks and accidental experiments. The junior officers are next, unwitting recipients of supercharged chocolate in everything from tea to breakfast porridge. Soon they're pacing the barracks, plotting a synchronized drill routine that only makes sense if you haven't slept in 3 days. With everyone wired and restless, camp discipline goes straight out the window. The atmosphere shifts from military order to something much more chaotic, a strange blend of carnival, schoolyard, and mad science fair. Some soldiers get creative. Someone paints the resident rooster in camouflage, arguing that it will boost security by preventing the enemy from stealing their alarm clock. The rooster, now a local celebrity, struts proudly, blissfully unaware of his contribution to tactical innovation. Others take a more direct approach to tactical humor. During one particularly long and sleepless night, the squad decides to stage a latrine lockdown, securing the door from the outside and posting a sign that reads, "Closed for renovations. Defend against all enemies." The unlucky lieutenant caught inside emerged 20 minutes later, slightly traumatized and vowing revenge. That same night, someone replaces all the soap in the wash tent with bars carved from emergency chocolate. The confusion and sticky hands lasts for days. But the chocolate's chaos doesn't stop at pranks. There are unintended consequences too. The hyperactive energy that once made for legendary night patrols and endless chess tournaments begins to wear thin. A group of recruits tries to set up an impromptu obstacle course at 2 a.m., nearly tripping the camp alarm and waking the neighboring company. Another squad, convinced they can hear enemy radio transmissions in their teeth, spends an entire evening hunched over a rusty kettle, waiting for it to start talking back. Of course, not all the fallout is funny in the moment. The medic's tent becomes a confessional booth, with sheepish soldiers admitting to accidentally overdosing on chocolate and then deciding it was a great time to reorganize the armory. The cook files a formal complaint when he finds a note reading, "Tonight's soup, powered by caffeine and regret." The officers, realizing that they're losing control, clamp down on chocolate rations. But the black market adapts, now swapping chocolate for pranks and promises of temporary immunity. Yet, for all the accidental chaos, these moments of absurdity serve a purpose. The pranks and jokes, the camouflage rooster and the latrine lockdowns become part of the camp's folklore. They give everyone a reason to laugh, sometimes at themselves, sometimes at the world, and sometimes at the sheer ridiculousness of trying to wage war while running on little more than nerves and chemically induced energy. When all is said and done, the chocolate's unintended consequences are as much about morale as they are about mishaps. In the blur of sleepless nights and endless days, a painted rooster or a barricaded latrine can make all the difference. They're reminders that, no matter how serious things get, humor and humanity always manage to sneak in. One square of chocolate and one harmless prank at a time. Back home, ads show square-jawed soldiers heroically clutching chocolate bars, looking more awake than anyone has a right to be. Civilians get their own energy bars, mostly just chocolate with marketing bravado. The war effort isn't just fought on muddy fields or behind enemy lines. It's waged just as fiercely in print, on radio waves, and in the polished glass windows of corner shops. As soon as rumors of the military's miracle chocolate reach the home front, the advertising machine kicks into overdrive. Out go the dainty bonbons and delicate pralines. This is the age of the victory bar, a slab of chocolate so robust it might double as a building material, if you can resist the urge to eat it first. Posters crop up in bakeries and town squares, featuring improbably handsome men and women, all radiant with health and apparently wide awake after nights on the front. The message is clear. True patriotism isn't just about growing vegetables or collecting scrap metal. It's about consuming your fair share of government-approved, morale-boosting chocolate. Strong soldiers need strong snacks, declares one ad, showing a family sitting at a breakfast table, each with a shiny brown bar next to their porridge. Civilian energy bars flood the market. At least, as much as rationing will allow. They promise alertness, vitality, and that extra push for long days. Housewives tuck them into lunch pails for factory shifts. Teachers hand them out to students before tests. Little Hans down the street tries to trade his for a comic book and half a boiled potato, but it's not quite the same recipe as the soldiers get. These bars are mostly regular chocolate, plus a few extra vitamins, a pinch of hope, and a double shot of wartime optimism. The radio, too, gets in on the act. You tune in and hear jingles sung with suspicious enthusiasm. From breakfast till the bugles call, "Eat a victory bar, stand tall." Mothers are encouraged to write letters filled with reminders. Don't forget to eat your energy bar before your next shift. And neighborhood competitions spring up for the best chocolate-themed lunchbox. In kitchens across the country, war cake recipes are adjusted to include shavings of the official bar, sometimes making for the world's most ambitious brownies. Of course, there's a sly undertone to the whole campaign. People can't help but wonder, what's really in the soldier's chocolate? Is it true that a single bite can keep a grown man awake all night? Are the rumors about special government ingredients real? Local gossip columnists invent wild theories. Imported jungle plants, a secret extract from Bavarian mountain herbs, a formula devised by a team of sleepless monks. The wilder the rumor, the more the bars fly off the shelves. Meanwhile, children play at being soldiers on patrol, trading bites of chocolate and making up rules. If you eat the whole bar, you win the battle, but you have to stay up and guard the fort until breakfast. Parents smile at the play acting, but more than one tired mother quietly worries what will happen if her own kids ever get their hands on the real thing. And, inevitably, there's a backlash. Some doctors warn against overconsumption. And local papers publish letters from concerned citizens. My son hasn't napped in 3 days. Could it be the new chocolate? My husband organized the pantry alphabetically after eating 2 bars. Is this normal? The authorities urge moderation, after all. Victory is sweet, but so is a good night's rest. In the end, the campaign works. The chocolate becomes both comfort and curiosity, a sweet link to the front lines and a symbol of shared sacrifice. And when the war is finally over and the last victory bar is unwrapped, there will be nostalgia for the days when chocolate was more than just a treat. It was a promise that, even in the darkest times, a little energy, real or imagined, could make all the difference. During major offensives, the chocolate is distributed like golden tickets. Morale soars, then plummets as the crash sets in. The after-action reports are mostly written in all caps. You can tell when something big is about to happen. The mood shifts. The orders become more cryptic. And suddenly, out comes the stash of emergency chocolate that's been hiding in the quartermaster's tent for weeks. The rumor mill spins up. We must be going on the move, someone whispers. They only hand out chocolate when things are about to get ugly. The bars are rationed out. 1 per man, maybe 2 if you're lucky, or look particularly sleep-deprived. They gleam in the morning sun, more precious than medals, cigarettes, or even dry socks. At first, the effect is electric. Spirits rise. The jokes get louder, the marching songs more enthusiastic. Even the grumpiest sergeant cracks a smile as the squad tucks away their golden ticket for the long night ahead. There's a sense of invincibility. Maybe this time you'll push through, outlast the exhaustion, make it through the assault with energy to spare. This is it, boys, someone shouts. Nothing can stop us now. Not hunger, not fatigue, not even common sense. It's almost enough to make you forget about the rain, the mud, and the cold. On the march, it feels like the chocolate is doing exactly what it promised. Boots hit the ground with purpose, and nobody drags behind. You feel sharp, alert, almost superhuman. Even the landscape seems brighter, the horizon less daunting. You can see your squad mates fighting off grins as they push forward, feeling that rush of energy and optimism. It's the kind of mood that makes you believe, for a little while, that you might actually be the hero in an adventure story. But then, inevitably, the pendulum swings back. As the hours grind on, the sugar rush wanes, the caffeine loses its magic, and reality comes roaring back. The euphoria fades, replaced by a heavy, collective exhaustion. The bravado that filled the air at dawn turns into silence and blank stares. Every muscle aches. The laughter stops, replaced by a symphony of yawns and groans. Even the most cheerful officers can't muster the energy for a pep talk. By the end of the push, as you dig in for the night or slump against whatever counts as shelter, the crash hits everyone at once. Men sleep where they drop, boots still laced, helmets askew. The camp is a patchwork of the truly unconscious and those stuck in the limbo of post-chocolate insomnia, staring at the sky and wondering when normal life will return. Someone mumbles, "Next time, I'll take my chances with just the beans and biscuits." Nobody disagrees. When the after-action reports roll in, you can spot the chocolate-fueled nights immediately. The handwriting is jagged, the sentences frantic and breathless. One page is a string of all caps and half-completed thoughts. Assault successful, need sleep, send more coffee. Who ate my last sock? Another contains a very detailed, but entirely unsolicited, account of a dream about talking cows and runaway chocolate bars. The officers do their best to explain the highs and lows. Some praise the chocolate as a morale booster, a necessary weapon in the battle against fatigue. Others warn that it's a double-edged sword, leaving men twice as exhausted, twice as irritable, and 3 times as likely to write poetry about latrines. A few propose switching to carrot sticks. Their suggestion is quietly ignored. And yet, in the end, everyone agrees. The chocolate did its job, if only for a little while. It gave hope, laughter, and one last push when it mattered most. It made soldiers believe they could keep going, long after their bodies told them to stop. And as the dust settles and the world returns to grey, you tuck the empty wrapper into your pocket, a crumpled reminder that even a little sweetness can make a difference, even if it leaves you more tired than when you started. The war ends, the rations disappear, and soldiers try to sleep again. Nightmares are common. Dreams involve running, chocolate rivers, and sometimes just blissful, uninterrupted unconsciousness. At first, you think it'll be easy. You survived on 4 hours of broken sleep and questionable energy bars for so long. Surely now you'll collapse into bed and not wake up until someone shakes you, or at least until breakfast. But the body has its own way of rebelling, and you quickly discover that after months or years of chocolate-fueled insomnia, normal sleep doesn't return on command. The first nights are the hardest. You lie in bed, exhausted but wide awake, every muscle tense, waiting for an order that never comes, and listening to a silence that's louder than any battlefield. Your mind, once kept sharp and spinning by industrial-strength chocolate, now races through old patrol routes, awkward camp jokes, and memories of friends long gone. You wake up at 2 a.m., convinced you've missed roll call. You sleep in odd fits and starts, haunted by dreams that feel like they're sponsored by both nostalgia and regret. Sometimes you dream of running, endless marches through muddy fields, chased by the ghost of a ration bar with teeth. Sometimes you float in chocolate rivers that are both sweet and slightly menacing, the current carrying you through a surreal landscape of endless supply tents and bottomless coffee mugs. For some, the return to civilian life is marked by a peculiar sense of restlessness. The world moves at a slower pace. You find yourself tapping your foot during quiet conversations, waiting for the next jolt of adrenaline that never arrives. Your friends and family notice you're a little high-strung. They say it with a smile, but you see their concern. At night, you count the hours of sleep as if they're another ration to be guarded jealously. You envy those who slip into peaceful slumber as easily as flipping a switch. Oddly enough, the smallest things bring you back. The faint smell of dark chocolate in a bakery window, the metallic crinkle of foil, the way your heart races when you see a coffee ad. You laugh it off when you can, joking that you have PTSD, post-traumatic snack disorder. But some part of you always wonders if you'll ever feel truly rested again. There are those who go to extremes, swearing off chocolate and caffeine for good. They experiment with herbal teas, warm milk, and every folk remedy they can find. Others resign themselves to the new normal, making peace with a life where sleep comes in fragments and mornings arrive too soon. A lucky few rediscover deep, dreamless sleep, a kind of sleep they'd almost forgotten was possible. They wake up dazed, grateful, and sometimes a little emotional. Old squad mates stay in touch, trading letters about civilian life. The conversation often drifts back to sleep. How to get it, how to enjoy it, how to deal with the strange, restless energy that lingers long after the war is over. Someone starts a running joke. If you hear me talking in my sleep, don't worry. I'm just dreaming about rations. And if I ask for chocolate, say no. Years later, at reunions, the subject always comes up. Someone inevitably pulls a faded chocolate wrapper from their wallet or footlocker, holding it up as proof that yes, the bars really did exist, and yes, they were as powerful and problematic as the legends say. Laughter follows, but there's a shared understanding too. The chocolate was more than just a snack. It was a lifeline, a curse, and sometimes a source of camaraderie when nothing else could get you through the night. In the end, returning to normal sleep is its own journey, a slow, sometimes bumpy road back to peace and rest. Some make it, some don't, but everyone who survived the chocolate wars agrees on one thing. There's nothing quite like the joy of falling asleep and staying asleep, free from alarms, from rations, and from the jittery grip of history's strangest bedtime story. Historians, food scientists, and the occasional sleep specialist debate the true effects. Was it the caffeine, the sugar, or just the desperate placebo of needing to stay awake? The end of the war doesn't mean the end of the story. In fact, it's just the beginning of a new chapter, one written not in barracks or trenches, but in musty archives, university labs, and around kitchen tables where veterans entertain their grandchildren with tales of the chocolate that made men invincible. Years later, the mystery of those jittery, sleepless nights becomes irresistible to anyone with a taste for a good story and a half-finished cup of coffee. For every scientific study published, there's 1,000 personal anecdotes, each one a little different. Old soldiers insist the bars were stronger than espresso, meaner than midnight, while others roll their eyes and claim it was just ordinary chocolate with a fancy name. Letters from the front are reread, diaries scoured, all in search of that elusive answer. Did it really work? Food scientists dive into the remaining bars, some preserved in museums, others hidden away in forgotten attic boxes, and begin their analysis. They measure caffeine content, sugar levels, the odd inclusion of cola nut or vitamins, and the not-so-subtle hint of desperation in every bite. Lab results are mixed. Some batches were, in fact, loaded with enough stimulants to keep a goat awake for a week. Others barely register more kick than your average cup of office coffee. The wild inconsistencies seem to confirm what every soldier already knew. Quality control was often left behind on the supply truck. Then there's the placebo effect, a phenomenon well known to anyone who's ever convinced themselves that a breath mint is a miracle cure. Historians argue that the real power of the emergency chocolate lay not in its ingredients, but in the circumstances. You're tired, cold, and terrified, and someone hands you a ration with the promise of energy. Hope, as it turns out, is a powerful stimulant. When you believed it would keep you awake, one veteran admits it usually did, for a little while at least. Sleep specialists are fascinated by the legacy. Decades after the war, they interview veterans who still have vivid dreams about the chocolate, who remember the precise taste, the texture, the way the world seemed to buzz just a little bit louder after each bite. It was real, says one old sergeant, but sometimes I think it was all in our heads. The answer, perhaps, is both. Chemistry and psychology locked together, marching hand in hand through sleepless nights. As the years pass, the legends only grow. Children hear stories about great-grandpa's super soldier snack. Amateur historians write blog posts speculating that the chocolate was the secret behind every late-night victory and every legendary midnight chess game. A few bold entrepreneurs even try to recreate the recipe for the modern market, advertising historical energy bars with a wink and a warning, "Don't eat after midnight." But maybe the biggest myth of all is the idea that a simple bar of chocolate could decide the course of a war. In truth, it was never just about the ingredients. It was about survival, about finding some small edge when you'd already given everything you had. It was about laughter and longing, about sharing rations and rumors, about believing that even in the darkest moments, a little sweetness and a lot of sugar could help you get through the night. Years later, you're cleaning out a relative's attic and find a crumbling chocolate wrapper. The smell is still vaguely terrifying. You wonder if you should call a museum or just back away slowly. It's the sort of discovery that feels like a punchline to a joke you forgot you were telling. There, buried under old uniforms, faded photographs, and boxes labeled miscellaneous, do not open, is the unmistakable flash of a dull olive green wrapper. You freeze, half expecting to hear a military bugle or, at the very least, your heart picking up its pace out of sheer ancestral memory. Carefully, you lift the wrapper out, its corners cracked and flaking, a relic of a world that once demanded sleepless nights and unbreakable morale. The attic is silent except for the distant rumble of a neighbor's lawnmower and the soft crunch of paper between your fingers. You squint at the faded lettering, half German, half warning label, all authority. There's a whiff of something ancient, a cross between dust, stale cocoa, and the ghost of nervous energy. Even after all these years, the wrapper seems to hum with purpose. You'd swear your hands are trembling a little, just holding it. What do you do with a find like this? For a moment, you picture yourself as an amateur Indiana Jones, clutching an artifact that belongs in a museum, or at least in the local historical society's weird war stuff cabinet. You imagine calling up a curator. Yes, I have in my possession a genuine piece of World War II history. No, I haven't tried to eat it. Yes, I'm sure it's safe. No, I will not be held liable if anyone tries. Part of you wonders if there's still a bar of chocolate inside, perfectly preserved by some unholy combination of preservatives and nostalgia. You poke at the edges, half expecting it to twitch. Thankfully, it's empty, though you don't shake it too hard, just in case. You think about all the hands that have held this wrapper before. A young soldier in a muddy trench, a nervous quartermaster packing supplies, maybe even a prankster officer plotting one last caffeine-fueled escapade. As you sit back on your heels, you realize just how many stories a simple wrapper can hold. It's not just a piece of packaging, it's a time capsule, a souvenir from a world where chocolate was more than a snack. You imagine letters home. Received your package. The socks were much appreciated. The chocolate is still working. You can almost hear the laughter echoing through the years, the tired jokes about jittery hands and sleepless nights, the whispered bets about who would crash first. The attic dust swirls as you gently refold the wrapper and tuck it back into the box. Maybe one day you'll show it to someone else, spin a tale about the chocolate that kept armies awake, or pass it down with the old medals and dog tags. Or maybe you'll let it rest, undisturbed, a silent witness to a strange chapter in family history. There's something oddly comforting about the discovery. In a world where so much gets lost, photos, stories, even memories, a flimsy piece of wartime foil has survived. It's proof that the small, absurd things can endure just as stubbornly as the big, important ones. The war is long over. The chocolate is gone. But the wrapper remains. A reminder that sometimes survival is measured not in heroics, but in the ordinary, everyday objects left behind. In the end, military chocolate inspired everything from energy bars to disaster rations. It's the ancestor of your favorite hiking snack, and the reason some people can't look at dark chocolate without flashbacks. It's strange to think that something as simple as a chocolate bar could have such a powerful afterlife. But military chocolate, gritty, bitter, and so densely packed with caffeine that some people still claim to hear colors when they see it, changed not only how soldiers fought, but how the world snacks. You can draw a direct line from those foil-wrapped emergency rations to the power bars stacked in every supermarket today. The influence lingers, a sticky, slightly jittery fingerprint on modern food culture. Before the war, chocolate was a treat. Something you unwrapped on your birthday or savored on a Sunday afternoon. War turned it into fuel, a portable, nearly indestructible source of quick energy for men marching through mud, rain, and existential dread. Military ration planners weren't aiming for flavor. They wanted shelf life, calories, and caffeine. The result was a bar that could outlast the apocalypse, if not your taste buds. It was a culinary experiment born of necessity, ingenuity, and the unspoken rule that if you can't sleep, you can at least stay awake for the fight. When peace finally returned, soldiers came home with stories, and sometimes stashes, of the infamous bars. Candy makers took notice. They saw opportunity in the idea of a snack that could double as a survival tool. The first commercial energy bars were essentially civilianized versions of wartime rations, sweet, dense, and loaded with all the vitamins and buzzwords the market could handle. They promised energy for action and fuel for adventure, echoing the slogans plastered on old propaganda posters. Never mind that nobody really wanted to eat them for fun. The thrill was in the idea that you could if you needed to. Disaster preparedness, too, got a makeover thanks to the humble military chocolate bar. If you've ever opened an emergency kit to find a shelf-stable, vaguely chocolate-flavored brick, you've witnessed the legacy in action. Governments around the world stocked bunkers and fallout shelters with bars that owed their existence and their dubious texture to the experiments of military confectioners. They became symbols of readiness, of resilience, of being able to tough it out, preferably somewhere with better snacks. Of course, the legacy isn't just practical. There's a kind of nostalgia attached to these survival snacks. For some, unwrapping a modern protein bar brings back memories of campfires, hiking trips, or the stories told by grandparents who once ate chocolate that could keep you awake for a week. For others, it's the reason they avoid dark chocolate entirely, haunted by the memory of that first, shocking bite of aggressively functional ration bar. In some families, a single wrapper is kept as a quirky heirloom, a reminder that survival sometimes tastes more like sacrifice than celebration. Even pop culture hasn't let go. Military chocolate has made appearances in films, documentaries, and countless memoirs, always described with a mix of horror, humor, and reluctant respect. It's a punchline, a plot device, a symbol of the lengths people will go to in extraordinary times. Modern advertising for energy bars still borrows the language of wartime. Maximum stamina, push past your limits, as if every trip to the gym is a battle for the fate of the free world. Deep in a Berlin lab, white-coated scientists huddle over cauldrons of cocoa, discussing military necessity in hushed tones. Every ingredient is weighed, every experiment recorded, except the ones that set off the smoke alarm. Rumor has it, the chocolate's formula is locked in a safe, right next to a half-eaten bratwurst and some very jittery rats. The chocolate bar that would become the stuff of legend didn't appear out of thin air. It was the result of months of brainstorming, testing, and occasional packing inside rooms that looked more like alchemical workshops than any bakery you've ever seen. The scientists involved were a peculiar breed, equal parts chemist, chef, and, if you believe the gossip, budding mad scientist. Their mission was simple on paper and terrifying in practice. Invent a snack so powerful it could keep soldiers awake, alert, and, hopefully, alive through the most exhausting stretches of the war. The process, of course, was anything but straightforward. The lab was cluttered with measuring cups, mortars, pestles, and a variety of substances labeled "Do not mix with coffee." Some days, the head of research would march in with a new directive from the ministry. More shelf life, less flavor, must withstand both Arctic frost and Saharan heat. Each request sent the team back to their cocoa-stained chalkboards, muttering about acceptable loss of palatability and unusual gastrointestinal side effects. It wasn't just about the cocoa. Every component was chosen with precision and, more often than not, a strong dose of paranoia. Cola nut extract arrived in mysterious brown bottles marked highly stimulating. Caffeine was delivered by the kilogram, prompting nervous jokes about who could run the fastest around the building after a taste test. Sugar, always in short supply, was swapped out for every conceivable substitute: honey, beet syrup, a dash of hope, depending on what the procurement officer could wrangle that week. And then there were the secret ingredients, whispered about even within the lab. A certain batch supposedly contained a vitamin blend designed to boost immune systems, stave off trench illnesses. Others, more experimental, tested out flavorings that had only ever been used in livestock feed. Whenever the chief scientist scrawled a new idea on the board, the staff exchanged glances that said, "Let's hope this one doesn't glow in the dark." Security was tight. Workers were searched for pocketed samples, and all lab notes were written in a code that, years later, even the scientists themselves couldn't quite decipher. Finished bars were shipped in unmarked crates, sealed with official wax, and often accompanied by armed guards. The formula itself was guarded with all the paranoia usually reserved for tank blueprints or battle plans. The joke around the lab was that the only thing more dangerous than the chocolate was the paperwork. The paranoia bled into the product's reputation. Was the recipe really a state secret? Or was that just a convenient way to explain why nobody actually liked the taste? Did the bars contain a mystery stimulant derived from some forgotten South American vine? Some believed the scientists themselves couldn't remember the true recipe, having gone slightly mad from months of sampling their own experiments. There were even rumors, never proven, but always entertaining, that an early batch escaped the lab and turned an entire squad of lab rats into insomniac gymnasts. Some units become infamous for their chocolate consumption. The night patrol squads, the radio operators, the poor souls on guard duty during blizzards. These are the true caffeine commandos, legendary for their 1,000-yard stares, suspiciously rapid Morse code, and ability to recite poetry at 3 in the morning. Nobody trusts a man who hasn't blinked in 12 hours. Every army has its characters, but nothing brings out the eccentricity quite like a steady diet of caffeinated chocolate. In the dark corners of the barracks, whispers swirl about the chosen few who take their rations seriously, and then take everyone else's, too. These men are not so much soldiers as they are sleep-resistant experiments in human endurance. The night patrol is their natural habitat. While most shudder at the thought of tramping through black forests at 2 a.m., these caffeine commandos volunteer, bars tucked into every available pocket, eyes wide and boots moving double time. Radio operators, too, become legends in their own right. Sitting for hours, headphones pressed to their ears, they scribble and tap out messages faster than seems humanly possible. Entire communications are sent in record time, though sometimes with a poetic flourish, as if the Morse code has started to rhyme. When the energy hits just right, they can translate 4 conversations at once and still have time to ask about your mother's potato soup recipe. There's always one who insists he's cracked enemy codes using only the buzzing in his teeth. Then there are the sentries, those unlucky, or perhaps lucky depending on your perspective, souls assigned to stand watch through the coldest, loneliest hours. The rest of the company tries to avoid the night shift, but for these men, it's a challenge to be conquered. Huddled behind sandbags or pacing along the perimeter, they unwrap their chocolate ration like it's a secret weapon. By dawn, they've spotted every movement, catalogued every sound, and are ready to regale the morning relief with tales of foxes, passing clouds, and the profound loneliness of an alert mind. Word gets around. When something goes missing, suspicion falls first on the caffeine commandos. Who else would be awake enough to plan a caper at 4 a.m.? When a new chocolate shipment arrives, it vanishes twice as fast as normal. leaving the rest of the squad quietly grateful and slightly nervous. Even the officers approach these men with caution, never quite sure if they're about to receive a detailed report on enemy activity or a spontaneous lecture on the philosophical implications of chocolate as a life force. Camp stories, as always, grow in the telling. One sergeant becomes famous for marching his unit through a storm, fueled entirely by emergency rations and the willpower of his twitchiest private. Another time, a pair of night watchmen are credited with saving the entire company, not by spotting an enemy attack, but by reorganizing the ammunition stockpile according to caliber, manufacturer, and vibe. There are rumors of a group who managed to build a working radio from scrap metal and chocolate wrappers, though this remains unverified. Of course, there's a price to be paid. By sunrise, the commandos often look like extras from a horror film, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking, and words coming faster than anyone can understand. Attempts at sleep are futile. Their bodies, now running on pure momentum and residual adrenaline, refuse to cooperate. Some choose to wander the camp, muttering about trench geometry and the secret life of boots. Others take up night painting, producing abstract works that future historians will puzzle over for decades. The Allies aren't sleeping on the job, literally. In a daring midnight raid, a group of British spies snatches a crate of super chocolate. The taste test back at headquarters goes badly. One agent ends up alphabetizing the entire war archive by sunrise. The top secret report reads, "Recommend weaponization, or possibly exorcism." Wartime espionage is rarely as glamorous as the movies make it seem. Forget tuxedos and gadgets. Most of the time, it's long nights, anxious waiting, and, if you're lucky, a cup of lukewarm tea. But every so often, something truly bizarre happens. The legend of the chocolate Job quickly becomes one of those stories. It all begins with rumors. Whispers about a new German ration bar, supposedly capable of turning exhausted soldiers into marching machines. Allied intelligence officers, already convinced the enemy is hiding every advantage possible, decide it's worth investigating. Enter the unsung heroes of military history, the snack spies. After weeks of surveillance, intercepted letters, and not-so-casual conversations with prisoners of war, they finally pinpoint a supply convoy, rumored to be carrying a shipment of the infamous chocolate. Under the cover of darkness, a squad of resourceful agents sneaks behind enemy lines. There are nerves, near misses, and more than one awkward tumble into a mud-filled ditch. But by dawn, they return with a prize, a battered crate labeled "Nur I am not for Lefnen," for emergency use only. Back at headquarters, curiosity wins out over caution. The first taste goes to Lieutenant Carstairs, a man whose only vice, until now, has been crossword puzzles. He breaks off a piece, chews thoughtfully, and raises one eyebrow. 15 minutes later, he's reorganizing the filing system and assigning new code names to all the office furniture. His assistant, Miss Fletcher, cautiously samples a crumb and spends the next hour drafting a 10-page memo about the need for more potted plants in the war room. The effects ripple outward. The archives, long considered an unsolvable labyrinth, are suddenly color-coded and cross-referenced. Teletypes clatter at double speed. The usually sleepy operations clerk pens a rousing poem titled "Ode to Efficient Administration." The chocolate is immediately locked in a vault, the key entrusted to the least ambitious member of staff, who falls asleep on it. Official reports are less enthusiastic. Initial results promising but unsustainable, notes one colonel, underlining unsustainable 3 times. May cause overconfidence, hyper-organization, and, in extreme cases, spontaneous poetry. 1. Memo suggests deploying the chocolate to field agents in need of short-term bursts of brilliance, followed by mandatory nap time. Another, more cautious, recommends weaponization, or possibly exorcism. The news spreads quickly through Allied command. Soon, spies from other departments are requesting samples for research purposes. Someone even floats the idea of using the chocolate as a bargaining chip in negotiations, offering it to particularly stubborn diplomats as a test of their endurance, or just to see if they'll start alphabetizing their notes. British, American, and even Free French agents trade stories of their own chocolate escapades, comparing symptoms like seasoned hypochondriacs. As word filters down to the rank and file, the bars acquire mythical status. Careful, one soldier jokes. That stuff will make you see through walls, and then write a report about it. Some claim to have traded for German chocolate on the black market, only to spend the night reorganizing their kit and dreaming of endless paperwork. Others, wary of the stories, steer clear altogether. "Give me biscuits and jam any day," grumbles one old sergeant. "At least those don't make you want to paint the latrine." Desperation breeds creativity. Soon, German soldiers are swapping their miracle chocolate for anything less caffeinated. Cigarettes, rations, or just the promise of a nap. Across no man's land, rival armies quietly exchange rations. There are no enemies in the universal brotherhood of sleep deprivation. It starts with whispers in the trench and sidelong glances during the rare moments of ceasefire. Everyone has heard the stories. The Germans have chocolate that will keep you awake for days. The Brits have tea for every hour. And the Americans, as always, seem to have endless cans of Spam. After a few weeks of the same grey stew and the same sleepless nights, the novelty of any new ration, no matter how strange, begins to outweigh loyalty to your own country's kitchen. The first exchanges are clumsy. A German private, eyes wild from his third night of patrol, waves a chocolate bar at a British sentry across the wire. The Brit responds with a tin of condensed milk. The transaction is silent, swift, and oddly respectful. Both men turn away, pretending nothing happened. But the next morning, more trades pop up. By the end of the week, a black market has formed, one where the only true currency is the promise of relief from whatever food or stimulant you're most sick of. Not all the trades make sense. One squad trades a whole case of the infamous chocolate bars for 2 packs of American cigarettes and a copy of a French romance novel. Usefulness unclear, but morale is morale. Another group discovers that Russian hardtack, while nearly inedible, makes an excellent bargaining chip, especially when swapped for a sweet, if slightly menacing, German ration bar. Allied and Axis soldiers, for a few minutes at a time, become unlikely business partners in the world's most peculiar trading floor. Secret passwords are invented, code words swapped. "Got any of the good stuff?" means, "I'll trade anything for a nap." Sometimes, soldiers even meet in the middle of the night, exchanging rations with a handshake and a look that says, "Don't worry, I haven't slept either." At the height of winter, a rumor sweeps through the trenches. Somewhere, someone has acquired a real chocolate cake in exchange for 6 bars and a week's worth of leave passes. Nobody believes it, but everyone wants to. There are unintended consequences, of course. Sleep-deprived German soldiers, having swapped their last bar, find themselves nodding off during roll call and invent increasingly creative excuses for missing morning drills. British units, now in possession of the high-octane chocolate, report strange dreams and even stranger poetry. American GIs write home that the German ration tastes like danger and regret. But it's still better than the 7th can of beans this week. Eventually, the higher-ups get wind of the underground exchange and try to clamp down. New rules are posted about unauthorized barter with enemy forces, but nobody really listens. Commanders know that as long as there's chocolate on one side and tea on the other, the trades will continue. After all, sometimes the only way to survive the absurdity of war is to borrow a little comfort from your enemies, even if it means enduring another night without sleep. In the end, these trades become the stuff of legend. Veterans swap stories at reunions about the time they traded a bar of chocolate for a French harmonica, or how they once out-bargained a rival squad for the last can of peaches. The details blur with time, but the memory of those small acts of defiance and connection remains sharp. Decades after the war, the legend of Kraft Chocolade lingers. Grandchildren ask their grandparents, "Did you really stay awake for 3 days?" Old soldiers just smile, pour another cup of coffee, and change the subject. Meanwhile, German candy makers avoid adding too much caffeine to their bars, just in case history repeats itself. There's a certain nostalgia that hangs over Germany's relationship with chocolate, one tinged with caution and a little bit of nervous laughter. In the years after the war, as peace returned and rationing faded, the stories about the fabled military chocolate grew with every retelling. Some were wild exaggerations, tales of men who saw through walls or ran marathons on a single bar. Others, quieter and more personal, focused on the simple truth. Sometimes, surviving meant doing whatever it took to stay awake, alert, and together. It wasn't just a bedtime story for the grandchildren. Kraft Chocolade, literally power chocolate, became a symbol of resilience, of ingenuity, and occasionally of overstepping all reasonable limits in the name of progress. In family kitchens, the old wrappers sometimes emerged, tucked into photo albums or folded up in biscuit tins, alongside medals and black and white pictures of nervous young men in oversized uniforms. These keepsakes didn't just speak of war, but of long nights, endless jokes, and that familiar, jittery sense that maybe you'd never sleep again. As the country rebuilt, chocolate changed too. The market blossomed with dozens of brands and flavors, each one vying to be the new national favorite. But there was an unspoken agreement among German confectioners. Never again would a chocolate bar come with a warning label longer than the ingredient list. You could have dark, milk, or hazelnut. You could have bars filled with marzipan, nougat, or cherries. But anything that promised to keep you awake for days was met with wary side-eye and a firm no thank you. Still, the legend persisted, woven into the culture in subtle ways. Some German families had running jokes about emergency chocolate for exam weeks or late-night study sessions, but nobody ever tried to replicate the original. Every now and then, a news article would surface about a new energy bar on the market, and an old-timer somewhere would mutter, "We've done that before pouring another strong coffee for good measure." On special occasions, reunions, anniversaries, or neighborhood gatherings, someone might propose a toast to the old days, to Kraft Chocolade, they'd say, clinking glasses with a wink, and to the miracle of modern sleep. Inevitably, someone would share a memory, the taste, the laughter, the strange, shivering aftermath. The younger generations listened, fascinated and horrified, trying to imagine a world where chocolate was as much a tool as a treat. Historians, always hungry for detail, occasionally tracked down those last surviving wrappers or even uneaten bars, finding them tucked away in attics or hidden at the back of old pantries. Museums added them to their exhibits, displaying the foil-wrapped bars with the same reverence as military medals or battered helmets. The placards always included a warning, "Do not attempt to eat." The staff, just to be sure, sometimes kept the bars under lock and key. Even in pop culture, Kraft Chocolade found its way in, mentioned in novels, war films, and TV comedies as a quirky detail of the era. It became shorthand for stubbornness and endurance, a culinary punchline, and a symbol of the ways people adapt when the world goes sideways. Some gourmet chocolatiers toyed with revival recipes, but wisely left out the questionable levels of caffeine, focusing instead on nostalgia and a gentler kind of energy. So, As you drift off tonight, maybe spare a thought for the sleep-deprived soldiers of history, men who marched, shivered, and jittered their way through endless nights, powered by a chocolate bar with more side effects than a medieval potion. They survived on a blend of caffeine, cocoa, and pure stubbornness, inventing new ways to keep going when their bodies begged for rest. Reflect for a moment. Those long, restless nights weren't just battles against exhaustion, but little testaments to human resilience. Imagine the absurdity. Grown men squinting at chessboards at 2 a.m., debating bathroom strategies, and writing home about their existentially energized snack breaks, all because someone, somewhere, thought that the solution to military fatigue was simply to add more chocolate and a dash of pharmaceutical optimism to the rations. If you ever wake at 3 a.m., with your heart racing and your brain inventing problems, remember, at least you're not trying to dig a trench in the rain with your digestive system plotting a coup. You're not in a frozen foxhole clutching a candy bar that tastes like destiny and regret. You're in your own bed, with clean sheets, warm blankets, and the blessed luxury of sleep that won't be interrupted by marching orders or the world's most dramatic sugar crash. So tonight, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the past, the people who survived history's wildest experiments so you could enjoy chocolate as a treat, not a military-grade stimulant. Because history is a reminder. People are persistent, hopeful,